Hey guys, welcome back to Your Lake Fork Guide, another episode of the Guides Network, and we got him back by popular demand, Mr. David Ozio. How you doing, sir?
I'm excellent, young man. I am so excellent. Thank you for having me. I just enjoy being out here and getting to talk to you wonderful people.
You know, guys, it is just a glorious time of year to be outside. It really is. If you have a chance to get outside and get on the water, get in the woods, whatever it is, get outside. This is picturesque, perfect weather. We couldn't ask for anything better. And we're going to get a lot more of that. And that changes the fishing some. And especially the longer this fall weather goes on, these fish are really going to start to utilize offshore structure. There's some specific structures they use, and there's some specific ways to locate them and find them and capitalize on that bite. So today, me and David are going to go in depth on how to catch fish on offshore structure during the fall. David, you know, the fall brings a lot of unique situations to us that are kind of unique just to the fall time of year. They don't really happen other times of the year, not in the way they do in the fall. And one of the most unique things is the way that the fish will get mixed up. You know, most of the year, if we pull up on an offshore structure spot, we see some fish on there, we throw in there and we catch them, and they're 1-pounders or 2-pounders. We might leave those and go look for bigger fish because the fish will tend to group by size, but that's not the case in the fall. They'll get all mixed up, won't they?
Well, and it's where they position themselves is the big key to all of that. And, you know, most people will stick to points, ridges, structure like that. But personally, Billy and I, we focus on a lot of different things. Road beds, number one. Golly, during the fall, the small sand bass and barfish will migrate up onto those tops of those road beds, especially the hard if they've got asphalt on them or whatever the case. Don't know whether it warms. I'd have to put a temperature probe down there to see, but it draws that bait up there and the big fish follow. And there's times of the day that those fish will come up there and feed on a classic road bed that has bridges on it. And our second favorite thing that we'll get into at that time of year is pond dams. And pond dams vary in depth. You'll see some that are shallow, some that are mid-depths, and even some that are extremely deep. And your electronics play really a key role in determining where those fish are at on those pond dams at any given time of the day. So, you know, you're a fantastic electronics guy, and you know, I know you're going to go into depth on that, but when you graph those spots like that, each pond dam, each road bed has really a pattern within a pattern. And a lot of times there might be a big chunk of rock or something knocked out of a road bed, and for some reason those fish migrate to that spot right there, which shows up extremely good on a side image. And especially too with the pond dam, for example, there might be some stumps down there on top of the pond dam, and you'll go over it with a down scan or even a regular 2D sonar, and you'll see those arcs right around that stump. And so those are key features that you're going to look for really during the fall as the water cools, say into the mid 60s is really the money temperature that you're going to wait for and look for.
Which is, we're starting to tickle that mid 60s. It keeps rising up above it every day, but we're so close to that mid 60s. It's going to be happening really, really soon. Now, one thing I would like to know is when you're looking at these road beds and pond dams, generally speaking, I know, you know, there's no hard rules, there's no absolutes in this bass fishing game. We know that. We get lost like everybody else does from time to time, but generally speaking, during this fall period, October, November, what depth do you find that they utilize the most? Like, what's your range that you're really kind of concentrating on?
One of the key spots that I'm fishing, getting ready to start fishing right now, is, especially with the lake being a couple of feet low, the top of that road bed right now is about 15 foot, maybe 16 foot, and that window between 15 and 20 feet is where those fish seem to all pile up. And I'll go to several different areas around the lake, and once I see that I can see arcs in that 16, 15, 17 foot range, 18 foot range, then I'll go try to mimic that around the lake at different road beds. Now there's some road beds that are at the top of the road beds in 25 to 28 foot, and sometimes they're there, but most times they're not. It's all going to be where that bait is. And there's days when you'll graph the top of that road bed, you won't see nothing, but off the side of the road, you'll see the barfish right on the slope. And there's going to be some point in time where they're going to migrate up on top, and that's when you need to have the rod and reel in your hand.
And yet we talked about, the different sizes of bass. We'll kind of group up together. They don't split up by size like they do throughout a lot of the year, but also multiple species will just show up on the same structure at the same time. You'll have catfish, you'll have crappie, you'll have sand bass, yellow bass, largemouth bass, and you literally might catch all of those on the same piece of structure right there at the same time.
And have had days where that has happened. Even, I'm going to add one more in there, drum.
Drum is another
Caught
one, yes.
Drum in there also in that same mixture, so it's identifying what those are down there, and then trying to selective casting. You could go down that road and you could see the different types of baits down there, and then you could see the fish that are ganged up around them.
And that's the deal, the bait. So the bait is what starts this whole thing.
Right.
So as you're starting to graph offshore spots and you're starting to find some of these road beds and these pond dams that me and Dave were talking about, and you start to graph them in the fall, what you'll notice is these huge sources of bait, massive bait balls of shad that sometimes might be 10, 12, 15 feet tall.
Absolutely.
Just the most unbelievable size of bait balls that you've ever seen. They will start to mass up. Well, as they start to mass up on this offshore structure, well, of course, these bait balls that you're seeing with these big balls of shad, those are smaller shad. Those aren't big gizzard shad or anything like that. Those are small shad. Well, the yellow bass, the sand bass, the crappie, the smaller catfish, the juvenile cat, they're all going to the juvenile bass, the large and small ones, they're all going to show up right when that bait shows up. They're going to get there. And then what happens is these big, lazy, lethargic, ginormous bass that Lake Fork is so famous for, it's an easy meal.
Yep.
They've got everything they could possibly want to eat, whether it be a crappie, a yellow bass, a little largemouth, whatever it is. There's a whole lot of opportunity for them to hang around the edges of these pond dams and these road beds.
Right.
And when they see an opportunity, ease up on top, get them a couple quick, easy meals, and then slide back down off the side of that structure. Right. And they just all really relate to each other in a unique deal. And it really only happens for a few weeks to a month, 5 weeks, a year, something like that, where you get the perfect storm where these pods of really big largemouth intersect with all these multiple species of smaller game fish but really big bait fish, if you want to qualify them as that, even though they're technically not bait fish. And those largemouth are just taking huge advantage of that. And that's why, because those giant largemouth are eating such big baits, that's why I really like throwing this bait, is because you're specifically trying to trigger the size of bait that fish is targeting.
Well, give me how you're going to work that.
Well, these big largemouth, they're pretty lethargic. Like when we're talking about big guys, we're talking about next level big. We're talking about some double-digit class fish. We're talking about 8, 9 pounders, 7 pounders, and we're really not talking about much anything smaller than that. When I'm targeting these offshore fish, I'm not trying to go out there and catch a bunch of fish. I'm trying to go out there and catch 1 or 2 of these really big fish, and then I'll supplement the rest of my fishing day fishing shallower and catching more numbers. But for this specific deal we're talking about, I'm trying to catch the biggest fish in my life. And so the way we're going to work this, we're going to tie this on, we're going to throw it out there, we're going to let it fall on a slack line. It's going to go all the way to the bottom. Okay, once it's all the way on the bottom, all I'm going to do is reel it, point my rod down, reel up my slack, I'm just going to lift my rod. So basically I'm going to swim that rod off the bottom, but just using my rod tip, so that way as I raise my rod tip, I can drop it back down and feed it slack, because this flutter spoon has to fall on slack line or it won't behave correctly. It won't kick and flutter and do what it does to draw the bites. Most of your bites are going to come while that spoon is fluttering around and falling, so it has to fall on slack line. So I'll just lift it up and then drop my rod tip, let it fall on slack line, always watching my slack, and then if I feel a bite or when I lift up, if I feel weight, I'm just going to start reeling real fast.
Right. Well, and it just goes to show, I mean, 2 different guides doing the same application. I've got a little bit different methodology. I'll take these things on that same type of road bed, long cast, sometimes I'll probably use 17-pound line on this, and long cast, pull out some line, let it flutter down, all right? Once it sets, I'm going to crank it 4 or 5 times, then I'm going to kill it and let it flutter down. And then as soon as I can feel that bait touch the bottom, I'm going to crank 3 or 4 or 5 times again, kill it. And I learned that a long time ago, and you'll almost always, when you crank that thing 3 or 4 times and kill it, as that thing flutters, you'll feel that line jump.
And it is very, that's what's great about bass fishing. We all do it a little bit differently, and we're doing it basically the same. You're swimming yours off the bottom, I'm swimming mine off the bottom. I'm just doing it slower, you're doing it faster. There's kind of no wrong way to fish that flutter spoon, as long as When it falls on slack line.
It's got to fall on slack
That's
line,
the only deal.
100%.
Let's break in to the electronics here. And you can absolutely use your side scan to pick out the unique part of the structure.
Absolutely.
And that's a great thing to focus on. What's also important is you need to be able to identify the different species, because there will be times when you'll pull out there and there may be the mother lode of sand bass,
Right.
and there's no largemouth. And if there's no largemouth there, there's no reason to fish there if that's your target species.
Have seen it.
And so you have to be able to identify these species. I think that's the most important part about fall fishing. When these species start getting mixed up, you really, really, really need to be able to identify the largemouth specifically compared to the other species of fish. So right now, let's talk about that a little bit, and we're going to overlay some images for you guys so you can see that I've shot here on my Lowrance graphs in my boat. This will be all fall period images that you guys are seeing, where I've shot these images on road beds, pond dams, stuff that we're fishing, that we're talking about during the fall periods in years past. But the big deal, as you guys will see in these images, is most of the species, the smaller species, the crappie, the yellow bass, the sand bass,
Fish.
on a sonar, on a 2D sonar, their arcs will literally be crossed up and intermingled.
Right.
Whereas a largemouth will have separation in that arc.
Right.
You'll see an individual arc here, an individual arc here, and an individual arc here. More especially during this fall period when you're trying to find those really big bass. Guys, this is not going to be a big school of bass. This is not going to be 20 or 30 bass.
Exactly.
We're talking about 3 to 5 to 8 bass is about what you're going to see when you're talking about these giant trophy bass that are picking off these crappie and yellow bass and white bass. Okay, so you're not looking for a whole lot of bass. And I'll even stop if I see just a couple arcs. If they're the right arcs and they're big arcs and I'm confident they're bass, I'll stop on those type of arcs. But the big deal is looking at the separation in the arcs and looking at the size of the arcs. And you'll see, if you look at the top of your graph, there'll be a palette. And whatever your densest color is will be at the top of that palette. So like I use palette 13 on Lowrance, my densest color is green. You use Humminbird. What is your dense color?
I use Humminbird, and what I notice on it is when I pass over something like that, the Humminbirds don't draw the arc as well as a Lowrance does.
The 2D sonar, right?
On 2D, but it'll draw it halfway. But what we've learned to identify is that if it's a catfish down there, it'll have the green, the yellow, and the red. The red is more forward on the fish of the arc.
Is the red your hardest return?
The red is
okay.
the most densest shot as you're going down there. And on a catfish, or even really a drum, that's going to be more in the front. When you see a bass down there, the red, the densest part of the fish, is going to be evenly distributed throughout the arc. And I find that on the Lowrance the same exact way. It'll be a thicker red, more uniform throughout the whole arc. A catfish, though, because the bladder and all the density is up front, you'll see the red and the yellow all up front. So that's one easy way to identify the difference between those two species. Now, you'll see a smaller red spot if it's a sand bass, but the dead giveaway on that is how tightly knit that those fish are together down there on the top of that road bed or the top of that pond dam, and then that tells you automatically that that's sand bass.
Yep, and that's great. Now, he's talking about red on the Humminbirds, but what you guys are seeing on these images is on palette 13 on Lowrance.
Right.
The dark green is the densest color. So just kind of translate that to what you're seeing to learn here. Dark green is what we're looking at on these images we're showing you, but same principle.
Same exact principle.
Works the exact same way. Yeah, and just kind of a general rule of thumb. The yellow bass, and this is not a hard rule, they'll break out of this pattern, but in general, the yellow bass will be like carpet. And the sand bass, they'll be carpet. They'll be like a real tight bunch right across the bottom. Right. The sand bass will be like what I call shad carpet. They'll be straight across the bottom, but they'll be taller.
Yeah.
They'll stack up higher. And then your crappie, even when they're not on a tree, a lot of times tend to stack up like a tree.
Right.
A lot of times. And the largemouth will be more of an oval shape. Whatever. If there's 5 or 6 largemouth down there, if you draw a circle around it, it'll be more of an oval. And one thing that I always do is I always run both 2D sonar and down imaging at the same time, so that I can use one to verify the other. Because one is not nearly as good without the other. If you can take it all, if you're going to read a book, you don't want to skip a page. I want all the information I can get when I'm using my graph. Speaking of identifying what you're seeing, when we have all these species mixed up and you're learning and you're trying to figure out what species is what, maybe the best way to do it is to tie on a jig and spin.
Oh, and I'm so glad you brought that up. Usually when I'm on a roadbed situation and I want to see exactly what it is, I'll dig into my box and get out a little 3/8 ounce silver spoon that has a feather on the back of it, put it on 10-pound line on a fairly light rod, long cast, and do the same type of motion. Reel it just a little bit, kill Try to hop it, reel it, kill it, whatever, and you'll eventually feel a little tick you lean into it, start reeling it in. Most of the time you'll come in with sand bass or even little barfish, yellow bass that are about that long, and that goes to show what's exactly down there. Rarely do I ever catch a shad on it unless I foul hook it, but it'll at least give me an idea what I'm looking at, especially when I put it on chirp and on down scan to really separate the targets and get a good idea. I've found over time that even on the chirp, the separation on shad, when they're there, they're still in a nice tight-knit ball, and you know, I mean, it's still going to tell me that it's shad. But what I'm looking for on that also is the arcs that are around that ball, and I've had at times in, say, 15 to 18 foot of water, and a bait ball like that comes through, I can see the arcs up at 10 foot, and they're just surrounding that bait ball. So it gives you another idea about how I'm going to attack those fish with more of a flutter spoon that flutters down, or even, say, a weightless fluke letting it fall.
Yep, that's a great point. And you know, this is absolutely maybe the best time of year to go learn how to use your electronics properly, because they're going to get gathered up in the biggest schools that they ever get gathered up in. There's going to be every species on earth there. You can see these species on your graph, throw that jigging spoon down there, catch it, identify what it is, build your confidence in reading your own electronics. So now you see that, you go, okay, well, I saw this group of fish that was really tight together. They were stacked a little vertical, a little spread out across the bottom like shad carpet, you know, just like we said, right, like shad carpet. And then I dropped that jigging spoon down there and I caught a white bass. Well, that's a white bass. And now you know, now you have the confidence, just like we do, to go out and identify, okay, when you're looking at your graph, it's like looking at a picture. This is sand bass, this is yellow bass, this is catfish, you know. And that's a big deal. That's a really, really important thing. If you can get to a point where you can identify the species, man, it zeroes you in so much more, and you fish so much more efficiently, because it's almost like sight fishing.
Right.
You don't fish unless they're there.
Yeah, personally too, what I do in that situation is I'm going to idle down that roadbed, and then until I go, whoa, look at that. And I'll always have a marker buoy right between my legs down there on the floor, and I'll pick that marker buoy up and I'll hurl it out to the side. I don't want to throw it right on top of the roadbed. I want to throw it out in the deeper water, and that gives me a good idea, you know. And I'll reach up and touch the graph also and drop a waypoint in right on top of where those fish were, but I've got a double way to recognize where those were, and then I can determine, are they moving, are they stationary, whatever the case, and then you can back up, and I have a reference point with that marker buoy, pick up that spoon, long cast, and I'm going to drag it right through them and see if those fish are active or inactive, and tells the whole story. It don't take me 10 or 15 minutes to learn it. You can keep on moving.
Yeah, and this fall deal, if they're going to get on it, they get on it pretty quick.
Oh yeah.
They don't waste no time.
They're most of the time, if there's other bait up on top that road, they're active, because they wouldn't be there unless they're feeding.
Yep. That's the deal. That's probably the best part about fall, is there's only one thing they're thinking about right now, and that's eating something. So it's a great time of year. It's a great time of year, man. It's an awesome time of year, and I know that, hey, if you guys want to come out and get on the boat with a full-time Lake Fork guide, you can always holler at us at yourlakeforkguide.com. We can get you set up on a trip with David. We can get you set up on a trip with myself, or one of the many other great Lake Fork guides that we work with. We would love to take care of you any way that we can, so holler at us at yourlakeforkguide.com. David, my brother.
Can't appreciate you enough, young man.
Man, I thank you,
fun,
sir.
man. I love doing this.
It is a lot of fun. Absolutely. It never gets old, does it?
Well, I just love for your people that are watching. I mean, it just helps you to be a better fisherman, and that's what this whole thing is about.
Right.
I mean, we want to help you catch more fish all the time.
We said it from the very beginning. We're going to build this community that we're trying to build, and we're going to build it based on one thing. Well, two things technically, and that's loving your fellow man and helping each other catch more fish. That's all it's about.
Brother.
That's all it's about. So we love it, man. And most importantly, we want to say thank you to each and every one of you that took the time to watch this video. We really appreciate it. We know we're not the best fishermen on earth, but we've got a lot of time on the water, and we sure enjoy sharing the experience, like David said, and hopefully helping you guys do exactly what we said we want to do. So thank you guys, and we'll see y'all next time right here on Your Lake Fork Guide.